Well, good evening, everyone. We want to welcome you to New Salem and our community conversations today with Victor Martinez and Jeremiah Ellison, who are both running for the 5th Ward. I know you were expecting Rev. McAfee to moderate, but you're stuck with me today. My name is Harton Talley, and I am a Northsider, and I grew up in the 5th Ward all of my life, right? All right. And we want to welcome you again. If you are coming in and you haven't heard already, if you have questions, we do have some cute little question cards right here with an ink pen. You can write your questions down, and we'll ask the questions accordingly. We do also have questions from Facebook. We will be asking those questions as well. Once we ask the questions, both candidates will have 3 minutes to answer the question each. We're going to start out with Victor. And if you would introduce yourself and tell us about your campaign, what you're running on, and as soon as you're done, Jeremiah, you follow up. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much. Most of you know me for many years, and I've been on the north side pushing 29 years. Graduated from Patrick Henry High School up the road here. Yeah, all right, the first one. That's good. Student body president there. I don't know if that means anything now, but so I've been in the north side for that many years. I pasture on the north side. I have a home on the north side. I have an investment property on the north side. I have a business, a car business on the north side. So I'm aware of what's going on the north side. Growing up on the north side, I moved to like 10 different locations. I was very familiar with the story of growing up in the area and moving around and the difficulties. I'm running for city council because I think the direction our city is headed, and if we watch the news the last couple of days on the north side, you still see we're heading in the wrong direction as a city. And I'm not the kind of person that just waits around and waits for someone else to do something about it. I believe I have some ideas that I think would change and help our community. You know, we've lost Aldi's, we lost Walgreens, we lost Chase Banks, we lost now probably the only sit-down restaurant on Broadway, and those things bother me because I have a family, I have small children, 11-year-old, 7 and 8-year-old, and so I want them to grow up here, I want them to be in the community, and I care about their safety, I care about bullets flying around. I was at North Commons just 2 weeks ago, and there was a fight, and staff was assaulted, and that's not the environment I want my children to grow in, so I'm either going to do something about it or I'm not, and so I choose to do something about it, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I think that what I have to say is something that the community really values and really wants in this area. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Jeremiah Ellison. I'm the current Ward 5 City Council member. I'm excited to be running for office again. I'm running for my 3rd term, but anybody who's following knows that these last 2 terms have been kind of weird 2-year terms. So it kind of feels like really an honest 2nd term, to finish my 2nd term. I'm born and raised here in North Minneapolis. I used to work as a lifeguard at the North Commons. I've worked at Avenues for Homeless Youth. I've been a teaching artist at Juxtaposition Arts. And so everything I've done with my whole life, you know, my parents raised us on the corner of 16th and Broadway. Everything I've done in my whole life, good and bad, I've done right here on the north side. And, you know, one of the things that I'm really excited about in terms of what I've been able to bring to City Hall has been, you know, I think I've been able to bring real vision and leadership ability to City Hall. North Minneapolis faces a lot of obstacles. But North Minneapolis is not defined by what we lack. We're not defined by our deficits. Anybody who lives here knows that for every challenge that we face, we have an abundance of creativity. We have an abundance of youthful energy. We are the youngest ward in the city as well. And so I approach this work understanding that while, yes, we have public safety challenges and they must be addressed, and people got to be held accountable, and people have to be given opportunity, I also understand that people need stable housing, people need dignified work, and people need to make sure that they can breathe the air. They need to be confident in their water source. They need to be confident that they can plant a vegetable garden in their backyard, right? We've got elevated rates of asthma, we've got elevated rates of lead poisoning in children, and these are the types of things that I've been working to address ever since I've been in office. And so I'm excited to get more into it. I'm excited to get into detail. I don't want to go over people's heads in the minutia of city policy, But I think that that is really what we need. We need somebody who understands the nitty-gritty of how things get done. I think I've been able to bring that through an unprecedented pandemic, through an unprecedented uprising and the murder of George Floyd. I feel like I've been able to provide stable leadership and vision, not only for the North Side, but up on the City Council and engaging in true collaboration with my colleagues and throughout the institution. So again, happy to get more into it, and thank you all so much for having me.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. So my name is Martinez. I'm chair of the Minnesota Civilian Public Safety Commission, and I just want to thank you two both for coming here today. One of the questions that we got online is, with all these closings, there's not been a grocery store in between Cub Foods and North Market. What would you do to propose to change for the food in Minneapolis?
Oh, it has a mute button. Not an on button, a mute button. This is a good one. When I heard about all these, I was as upset as anybody else would be upset. The first thing I did though is look who owned the building, Wellington, and see what the community was saying about their experience. And so first thing I did was look at my own network of relationships about who owns a grocery store right now that is successful, that would be willing to invest in the North Side. And I did that. I brought that person to the table of Wellington. I brought him to Councilmember Vital at that time up there, and tried to negotiate. You know, I told him I'm a cheerleader. I'm not here to, I'm here to, raise my pom-poms and say, come on, get it done. And I realized there's a lot of things in our city and in our development that is sometimes a hindrance to bringing business here. And the number one reason they pulled out was because they said they don't feel like the North Side really wants them. And so it's sad that it's hard to bring business in, and it's hard to keep them here. But I made a promise. This next election is a 2-year cycle. And within my first term, I promise and I give my word that I will bring a mom and pop grocery store to the North Side and give it the opportunity. Thank you.
I appreciate the question. Yeah, like everyone, myself, the mayor, the developer, heard that Aldi was leaving pretty suddenly, right? Same thing with Walgreens. I know that after the pandemic, Walgreens asked for a meeting for me and the mayor, and they said, we're committed to Uptown, and we're committed to West Broadway. That was the promise that they made. Now, I can't speak for these larger corporations of why they would leave. I do know that the developer offered to, they said it was a spacing issue. The developer said, hey, we'll expand your space, we'll expand your footprint. And they said, never mind, it's not really a spacing issue. And they left. And so, so I've talked to the mayor, I've been talking to CPED leadership. We've floated a few ideas. We know that North Market is, while successful where they are, the jury's out on whether they're ready to expand, but we're having conversations about what it looks like to go talk to a local grocer who we know is ready to invest in North Minneapolis, because I think that that's important, right? Ultimately, I want to see us invest. I want us to continue to do something that I have been doing while in office, which is looking for entrepreneurs here, looking for local businesses here, and giving them opportunities to grow in their space. So while it is frustrating when we see Aldi's and Walgreens close, I also think it is important for us to acknowledge that in the last 3 years, more Northsiders who live here and started their businesses here have been able to own buildings along West Broadway than almost ever in the history of the North Side. That's in large part due to the Commercial Property Development Fund, which is a gap financing tool that we are delivering to Northsiders in order to help close that gap in ownership, right? When they don't have enough to buy, we come in, we help them secure a building. You're seeing that with Kenny McKnight, you're seeing that with Calvin Littlejohn, you're seeing that up in Camden area as well, where folks are able to own their building. And we're not done. Right? I think we've got about a dozen people who own. I won't be satisfied until every Northside parcel is owned locally by somebody in this neighborhood. I say that to say that while I don't know why a transnational corporation would not view Northside as worthy of investing in, I do know local businesses who view Northside as worthy of investing in. And so I plan on continuing those conversations with the mayor, continuing those conversations with Wellington about what it takes to get a local grocer in there. And whether that is Cub expanding and doing a satellite store, whether that's North Market expanding and doing a second store, I don't have that answer yet, but I do know that those conversations are happening, and I do know that we've had success on other areas and other corridors in North Minneapolis.
Thank you. What can the city do to help in regards to loitering and drug use on the corner of Lowry and Penn Avenue?
Lowry and Penn?
Yes.
Yeah, happy to take this on. In the last couple of years, actually, since I got into office, well, there are challenges everywhere, but there are a small handful of corners that folks experience in North Minneapolis that we know are consistent, chronic problem corners, right? 12th and Morgan, West Broadway and Lindale, right? There's a number of corners where we know this stuff is concentrated. And I was having issues on how to deal with it. I remember at 12th and Morgan, I went down there to talk to the guys and got my life threatened a few times. And Kelvin Pulfus, then Inspector Kelvin Pulfus was like, "Councilmember, don't do that. You're gonna go get yourself hurt." But what we landed on, myself and Inspector Adams, for West Broadway and Lindale was a intergovernmental collaboration with the state in order to bring a nuisance action against the two businesses on Lindale and West Broadway, and say, the state is going to shut you down, right? The city might not have had the full tools, but NPD had the knowledge, the community had the knowledge. I had a lot of information and anecdotes and witnesses in the hands of the state, and we said, we're going to partner together and hand that to the state, and the state's going to shut you down if the activity doesn't cease. And in the last 9 months, there's not been a critical incident on West Broadway and Lindale. I use that as an example because it's the first time that a partnership like that was able to happen, and I think that it can be used as a model for how we can clean up other corners and prevent other corners from exacerbating issues in addressing violence and making sure that we don't have critical incidences elsewhere in the community. So that's why I bring up that example. I think intergovernmental partnerships are the way to go. They've worked in the past, and I think they're going to work moving forward.
So I've heard people say Broadway, Lindale, it took 30 years for that to happen. 30 years. And we have other hotspots that have been there for 30 years. We've had time to do that work. We've had time to advocate for that. And it just hasn't happened. And I believe that places and businesses that are allow this behavior outside of their business, they need pressure. So I have friends that have businesses on Lindale, South Minneapolis, Lake Street, and they control the crime in front of them. They control it. In fact, that was one of the issues with Wellington. We came to Wellington and said, this group that I'm bringing to you has success dealing with loitering and dealing with criminal activity. They've done it. It would be great here. They didn't seem to be interested in that. That's the reality. There are businesses and developers that do not really care about the safety of the intersections. That's not their prerogative. That is not on the list. My thoughts is that every business, if we can shut down a precinct, if we can shut down something because we don't like it, or we can start a movement to defund the police, and we can do something so big and extreme, why can't we handle intersections that are taking lives of our children? And so we've had years to do that. We've had the last 5 years right now to do that. Why hasn't it been done, right? And that's what I want to do. Give me the opportunity, and I'll show you how to get it done. There's a way to do it, and there's a way to get results. And that's what I promise you. Thank you.
Next up, how will you answer your phone calls and emails if you are elected? It's a huge concern and problem in this world.
I make a pledge that within 24 hours, you will get a response from my office. 24 hours. And I know I can do that because I've worked at an identity theft company that deals with marketing and communications, hundreds of calls. And I have a confidence that I can do that. that if you want someone to respond to you, I've had neighbors say, I don't want to call the police for this situation. What do? They call me. And I go there, and I go talk to the homeowners, and I go talk to the people that own the buildings. So that's my pledge to you. Give me an opportunity, even try it now. You have my email on my public website, you have my opponent's email on the website. Communicate with us. I have a full-time job too. I have a small children. I have a small business on the side. I have a church. I'm just as busy as anybody else. But give it an opportunity, try it. If that's something you value, try it right now and find out for yourself. Thank you.
Constituent service is one of the number one things that you can do in this job. And when I got in office, we have what's called a constituent service tracker, right? In the system, the more constituent service requests are made, the more that 311, other organizations are going to take it, within the institution are going to take it serious. When I first got in office, Ward 5 had the fewest number of constituent complaints. Do we have the fewest number of issues in our ward compared to the rest of the city? Absolutely not. I made it my personal mission to make sure that we were increasing complaints. And why weren't people making those requests? Because they had lost faith in the system. They had lost faith that 311 was going to work on their behalf. And so we have seen that number skyrocket. Now, what I can say, I can talk about what we've done in this office compared to the past, and I can talk about the needs in this community compared to every other city in the ward, every other ward in the city. But I'll say this: since I've been in office, we are putting out bi-weekly newsletters. Very few other offices do that. I think Ward 3 does it. Few other offices do it. I have weekly open office hours. We logged thousands of hours. We solved thousands of cases that way in the last 6 years. And I've done more public meetings than anybody else who's held this position, and certainly more public meetings than any of my colleagues. And so we're working to make this office more accessible. The truth is that Ward 5 has a depth of need, and we're trying to meet that need the way that we can. We've got a depth of need. I get 40 to 50 text messages personally on my phone, in addition to the calls that we get to my office, right? No other council members dealing with that volume. And I invite it because I think that we owe it to the community to meet that standard and to deliver those services. But I always take constituent services very seriously. I've been critiqued in the past. I'm ready to hear those critiques. But I can also talk about the ways in which we've delivered, and I know that we're solving and resolving more constituent cases than any other ward in the city.
Thank you. There is immense potential in our youth. How are we as a city prepared to tap into their leadership and their power?
I was a youth pastor for 10 years. I know youth pretty good, and I'm not that old, so I still remember what it is to be a young person. I'll give you an example. Right towards the end of the pandemic, when young people were outside, they weren't in school, they weren't doing anything. But the summer came for employment to begin. I went to the Step Up program. We all know the Step Up program here. And I asked them, hey, what's going on? What are we doing for the kids in the summer? Because they have a program with 13 and 14-year-olds. They have just straight up jobs for the summer. And they told me that there's not enough employers to send these kids. In other words, there's money, but there's not enough employers. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that. I went to Alabama, the park board. If you don't know, they are the #1 hire of young people. And I told them, hey, is there a way to get more work for these young people? He's like, what? We have work. And I said, well, they're telling me over there, the Step Up program, that there's not enough work. He's like, that's BS, he said. That means there's money that was just left over that was supposed to go to our young kids, our young community here, that wasn't going. And for those that don't know, Northside has the highest concentration of youth in the state of Minnesota. So when you're talking about what we're doing, what are we giving money to now that isn't working, and who's asking those questions? The other thing is that I was, for 20 years, and this is Al Van Goor's word, he said the youth area of our work hasn't had a raise for about 20 years. So I fought it. I made an issue for those that know that I ran last time. I made an issue for young people. And the mayor pressured the mayor the way I could, and he put $2 million into it. First time. So there's things that we have now that aren't working very well, and we got to ask those questions. We want our young people to have a job, we want them to have opportunities. We need to get rid of that. We need to get rid of that. It's only for nonprofits. You understand that the Step Up program only gives these kids to nonprofits? They're not giving them to for-profits to learn how to run a business, or teaching them to run a nonprofit, or just to be a body there to do things. So that's what I would be asking. And I would push to change that rule with Step Up and say, no, let's get them to for-profit businesses in our community to work. Because if these kids work in our community, they'll have value added to the community, they'll help businesses survive. It's important. Thank you.
So I spent years as a youth worker. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, but I spent many years, as a lifeguard, teaching kids swim lessons, spent many years at Juxtaposition Arts, spent many years at Avenues for Homeless Youth, working directly with youth, and I'm still engaged directly with youth. And so I think that two things, we need to be able to provide two things. One is we have increased the amount that the city is giving to the parks. We need to continue that work, right? We need to continue that work. But kids do also need job opportunities as well. Right now on Plymouth, you've got an entrepreneur who is working on jobs training programs for the future, green energy jobs, right? And that is something that, and so that is a program where we know that kids are going to need careers in electricity. They're going to need careers in installing solar panels. They're going to need careers in helping create rain gardens to prevent flooding, because those are all issues that are coming for us soon. But we also know that they're going to need career tracks much further than that, which is why we're working to build a modular factory that's going to open up just in about a year and a half. Devin George is the north side, somebody who's born and raised on the north side, who's working on opening that business. And so we know that kids need jobs, but kids don't only need jobs, they need opportunities. And so they need to be invested in, whether that's sports, whether that's the arts. And we know that our, we've got organizations like Juxtaposition. We have made huge moves to make our neighborhood programs more equitable. We've got on the north side, we've got diverse neighborhood organization representation here. That's not true for every part of the city, right? And so we need to be investing in those programs, not only so that our kids can go ahead and figure out what their career is going to be, but also so they can figure out what their purpose is, so they can figure out what their hobbies are. They can figure out how to build a community. So those are the things that I'm interested in funding. Those are the things that I'm working on. And those are the things that I plan to continue to work on.
Okay, we're going to take this opportunity to welcome you guys all to the debate with Victor Martinez and Jeremiah Ellison. If you have questions, we have these cute little question cards for you. Come up front and just go ahead and fill those out so we can go ahead and ask the questions. Our next question is, what do you think about rent control and what do you plan to do about it? Victor, let's start with you.
I'm not shy about it. I don't support it. I don't think it works. I don't think there's proof that it works. I think that St. Paul is a good example. They passed a very aggressive rent control, and the leadership did everything they can push back because banks pulled out. If we all live in North Minneapolis, and we know there's a lot of empty spaces. And some of these spaces have been empty for 20 plus years. The last thing we need is to stop building on these spaces, right? And so we already know that the rent control would hinder that, and we need investment. You talk to people that have been in the community for a while advocating for this. Al McFarland, he's been here forever, and he tells me this, and he does it on his program. He says, the North Side needs investment. And if you don't encourage investment, you're going to have the same thing in another 20 years. And so I want to bring these empty spaces, bring them alive. And so that's why I don't support rent control. I just don't think it works. I'm tired of being a social experiment in our city. I'm tired of having to be strong to handle all the conflicts here. I'm tired of anybody here tired of having to be strong to take all the problems here? I'm tired of it. Right? I'm only 37 years old. I'm tired of it. And I think our neighbors are tired of it as well. So, thank you.
Is there anybody here that believes that most of North Minneapolis is doing fine with rent? Is there anybody here who knows no one who's dealing with cost burden when it comes to rent, groceries, all those kinds of things, right?
What about property taxes?
That's not the question, but I'm happy to answer that.
It's becoming a burden.
Happy to answer that. Oh, yeah, sure. We can talk about property taxes.
That's right.
The truth is that there are as many rent control policies as there are cities that have rent control. That means that every city that has rent control is tailoring that policy to their specific city. Now, if you want to convince me that St. Paul is way worse off than Minneapolis, I think that the people of St. Paul, I think the mayor of St. Paul would have something to say about that. Just in the last couple of months, after rent control was initially passed in St. Paul, and there was this big scare about nobody's going to build in St. Paul, the building has made, the number of permits pulled to build new units has skyrocketed. It's getting back up to normal. It's increasing, right? And so to act like that St. Paul is some cautionary tale is just not correct. So I think that we need to have an informed conversation about rent control. The residents of Minneapolis deserve that we have an informed conversation about rent control, and I am supportive of a policy that works. You can write a policy that doesn't work. You can also write a policy that does nothing, right? That essentially is so weak it does nothing. You can also write a policy that is tailor-made for the city that you're in, which is what every other city has done, and they've done it through deliberation, they've done it through discussion. Are you going to tell me that San Francisco is not a market that anybody wants to be in? You're going to tell me that New York City is not a market that anybody wants to be in? These are the examples of the nightmare scenarios that people are painting when they say we're going to have rent control in our city. We need to have a conversation about people's rents increasing. And we need to decide through a rent stabilization policy how we're going to prevent people's rent increases from ballooning so that they can't keep up with them. So that's what I'm for, and it is something that we're going to do next term. We continue the conversation here, and it's something that a lot of the cities, most of the city, including Ward 5, voted for the Minneapolis City Council to be able to consider a policy. We haven't yet considered one, but we're going to next term.
So some of the concerns that people have brought forward about the rent control conversation is pieces missing. I mean, we want to be Minneapolis, right? We want Minneapolis to be great, regardless of commitment to other cities. I think the concerns that I've been hearing are if we have rent control, there's an assumption that the landlords will stay. So you can tell someone with a charge 3%, you can't raise it more than 3%. But the concern is, or tell what you think about the concern. If someone, a family of four, is living in an apartment that didn't have 3% rent stabilization, but then that family grows by one kid and they grew out of the apartment, they can't go live anywhere else because they can't afford it. Or is the landlords, are you requiring them that they can't raise their rent over 3% and they have to keep the place? So there's an assumption that the landlord has to stay where they are, and you're telling them you can't raise your rent higher than 3%, but you're telling them they have to stay. Because the landlord can just move and go to Bloomington and Richfield, and the person's still not living in Minneapolis. So how does that solve the problem? I just want to hear more common sense commentary.
Yeah. I'm happy to
Yeah.
Oh,
that was for him? All right.
It was a direct response to that.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Latanya. I think often what's happening with those kinds of hypotheticals is that everybody has written a rent control policy in their mind, right? Everybody has, if you don't like the policy, you've written the worst policy in your mind. If you like the policy, you've written the best one in your mind. And then these scenarios that would be hashed out through a diligent and studious discussion among the entire city, which we have not had yet. People have these answers to them, right? The answer to that question will be borne out through the public hearing process, through studying the policy, through staff recommendation, through council amendments. The answer to your question is borne out through the process, and we have not yet gone through that process yet, right? We also aren't locked in. We're the same way that we're not locked into a 10% cap, we're not locked into a 3% cap, right? We're not locked into 1% plus CPI. The possibilities for how we write this policy so that it protects the most vulnerable people in the city is still very much an open question. And what I'm advocating for is that we go ahead and explore that question. and we write the best policy for Minneapolis.
My response is this. It's one thing to say that this is what you want, and it's another thing to see the forces that be in our city what they want. And the forces that be in our city that are pushing rent control, they want a strict 3%. They have a strict vision of what they want. Now, if our council member has a different vision that's more flexible, I would love to hear that in an article. I would like to see that in a tweet. I would like to know that. But right now, the forces that be that are lined up with the rent control are a lot stricter than what our council members say. If it's his plan, I would be behind him. But that's just not what it is. The reality is, North Side, Ward 5 is the most economical place to rent a home. How do I know that? Because for 25 years, I've been bringing people in the Latino community or people that I know that are looking for, I've been bringing them here. So, you know, my mom, half my family lives on the North Side because it's the cheapest place to be. City View Apartments is a place where, for a studio, $650. And all you gotta do is pay electricity. Right? And they're always having vacancies. And as soon as a vacancy comes up, someone that I know is looking for a house, go right there. And so when I talk to the owner there, when I talk to the person that owns that building, you know, she tells me this. She tells me very clearly. She says, Victor, I do everything I can to make it economical for this group of people that we're serving here. I put clothes out for them. I let you as a pastor come in here and help them with other needs. But if you're telling me that there's going to be a rent control and it's going to be around 3%, you know, I got to be more active and start raising my rent because I haven't raised it in 2-3 years. Now that I know that I have a building, I charge extremely low. And I'm like, I want people to live here because any decent homeowner that's from the community or that has the American dream of owning a property, they want to keep their tenants and they keep the loans right now. I do have a problem with the corporate landlords that don't even live here, but we've been talking about that for 20 years, and nothing's been done about it. You know, sometimes we take them to court, but the people get just tossed out the building. You know, I think that we need to use other means to control rent. If someone is abusive, I saw what happened in Harrison. All of a sudden, they bring up rent $300. Just they didn't do anything to the building. They just for whatever reason. I think that we need to use our licensing to come down on that because that is not fair. That is not okay. And so I would rather go that way and be flexible with the business, with our mom and pop businesses that we have here that are doing a good job in the community. That's what I would prefer. Again, if it's as flexible as our council member says it, I'll sign on to it. But right now, the powers that be are not saying that. Thank you.
I'll try to read this question scripted and hard, but if I get it wrong, please let me know whoever wrote it. Ward 5 is the youngest ward, and the North Side statistically has the most youth under 18. Jeremiah, why did you approve a 63-plex 5-story building of all studio apartments? We need more family housing, and they're saying it's regarding James Archer's development at Plymouth Avenue in Penn. I'm sure you know that. You know what that is. The 63
Are they saying that the project at Plymouth and Penn, Plymouth and Russell?
I'm trying to be
They
representative.
say that's all of studios. That project is.
Why did you approve a Flex 5-story building of all studio apartments?
I don't know of any project in North Minneapolis like that. I mean, maybe there's a project over on Second by the Gold Group. You know, city had no leverage there. They do have some affordability in that building, but they weren't interested in providing much affordability. As far as any projects that had to go through council approval because it was on city-owned land, or because it needed variances, or because it needed, you know, those conditional use permits, there's no project that I can think of that has all studio apartments that I would have approved. The project, the James Archer's project, it does have a mix of some studios, some 1-bedroom, some 2, and some 3 bedrooms. The project on the river, which I believe in the city of Minneapolis is going to be the first project with any level of affordability to be on the river, has a mix of, it used a federal tool called income averaging as a way to lower the price on some by increasing the price on others. Basically, the whole building would be 60% of affordability, but instead of doing that, they made some of the units 80% of affordability so that they could have some be 30. Now, to make sense of that 30% units, that's the deepest level of affordability that the city is allowed to fund through federal guidelines, right? And so you're gonna have people making 30% of the area median income, 40%, 50%, and 60% living on the river. Not a lot of projects like that across the city, right? Tim Bailey project is gonna have a certain level of affordability in that project, right? Which is on West Broadway next to Cup Foods. The Art Space building is going to have a certain level, has affordability in that project. It's already up and running. But it's not only about affordable rental options. Especially in the last 2 years, North Minneapolis Ward 5, through a number of policies that I've worked on, through some collaborations with my colleagues, has gotten the most money for perpetually affordable home ownership. And I want to see that increase. In the last 2 years, we've gotten both 80 and 70% of all of the perpetually affordable home ownership money that the city has to offer here on the north side. I take a big point of pride in that. In addition, we're building a number of projects, a number of townhomes, about 17 units in Glenwood, which is fastly gentrifying, which is not becoming affordable, which is quickly becoming unaffordable, all going to be geared towards ownership. I don't only want people to have an affordable place to rent, I want people to have an affordable place where they can own and build wealth and pass that down to their family.
So that question is for Jeremiah, and I asked for both of you on that same point. So 30% AMI in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Wilmington is $124,000 based on $124,000. The AMI, the area median income for 30%, is based on the income for the area median income of $124,000.
Right.
That is not conducive to those Minneapolis per se to your board. So what is the concept that you guys would have in terms of area median income? We keep saying we want affordable apartments at area median income, but 30% is not realistic for your board.
Right.
So what kind of conversation you guys can do in that regard?
I'm happy to. Okay, fine.
Thank you. I think those are facts. When we talk about affordable housing here, how many think that it's actually really affordable? It's not. Go look at these buildings. Go look at the rents, what they would actually cost, right? So it's just another virtual signaling we use to say it's affordable when it's more expensive than I would like for even myself or any family members that I'm trying to bring here. Now, a little bit of a question she asked is about, we have the highest concentration of young people, 75% of Ward 5 is people of colors. One thing you know about people of colors, we have more children than our counterparts of our white community, right? We have 2, 3 on average. And the last time I checked, in the last 4 years or 5 years, 95% of new development has been 1 or 2 bedrooms. What do you think about that? North Minneapolis is 75% people of color, and most of them is 1 or 2. So when you think about like what's North Minneapolis being built for, you get a good idea. You look down the road, we are now a more renter than we have homeowners. Biggest transfer of wealth from in our city, where it's going to individuals, is not affordable. It's very difficult. And some of these land trusts, I'm not a big fan of land trusts and things of that nature, because the reality is, after 20 years, people sell their homes, and they call me like, Victor, I got a land trust, and 20 years later, I have almost no equity at all. So some of these things aren't the best things for our community, but we need to start building 3 or 4 bedroom homes in this community for people that want to stay here, right? When I talk to Jermaine, folks that are involved in the development world, they want to see 3 and 4 bedroom units. If the north side is really being developed for people of color. If not, and if we want to continue the same pattern we currently have, then in about 5-10 years, this community is going to change very drastically. Thank you.
It's an important question, because the AMI, federal guidelines, all that stuff, it starts to sound like, I've got to know it because we're dealing with the weeds in City Hall, but it starts to just kind of like sound like a bunch of excuses after a while, right? But here's what Latanya is making, the point that Latanya is making, which is true, which is if you take the neighborhood median income here in North Minneapolis, and then you take the area median income, which is the 7-county metro. That's what the area median income is based on. That's federal guidelines. City council doesn't get to decide that, right? But if you take 30% of the area median income, it more resembles 100% of the neighborhood median income here in North Minneapolis, right? That's why it's important to build more 30% on the north side. And we have done that in the last 6 years. We've built more 30% than anywhere. But If you build all 30% in North Minneapolis, what you are saying to the rest of the city is that North Minneapolis is for poor folks and poor folks only. You've got to have a mix of incomes. And, not to get too extreme here, but if you want people to be able to stay where they want to live, then you've got to make sure that people have dignified jobs that they can work so that they can pay increases in rent. You got to build what's affordable. But if what is affordable continues to go down, then you're never meeting the problem. You got to pay people more. You got to create more jobs. I've done that. I've done that work here at City Hall. So I'm happy to get more into that. I know that we've got short answers. I could go on and on about how I think rent control plays a role in this. I could go on and on about all of those things. But I think I do think that it's important to say that when we start talking about affordability, we don't want to concentrate poverty. We don't want to displace people either. And the way that you do neither is by making sure that you're building affordability at a multitude of levels and that you're paying people more, giving people an opportunity to earn more for their family and eventually own, as I mentioned earlier.
So this question was submitted during the conversation. You talked about rent control, however, what have you done to keep insurance costs down? Homeowners and autos seem to have a redlining issue.
Can you say that last sentence one more time?
You talked about rent control, however, what have you done to keep insurance costs down? And what do you do? Homeowners and autos seem to have a redlining issue.
What have we done? Well, how many had their property value go up pretty good in the last couple of years? I think everybody. If you didn't raise your hands, you probably don't own a home and you haven't seen that. But if you've seen that, or if your rent has gone up, then one of the reasons probably is because the property taxes has gone up. And so when we talk about helping people stay here, you're pricing them out. One of the reasons the Homewood neighborhood fought a change from the city that was going to make the space a special zone for older homes was because they were all going to be, a lot of the folks that were going to be priced out because they wouldn't be able to afford fixing their homes, right? And so that is a problem. Now, I've heard people say, okay, Victor, I'm okay with paying more property taxes, but give me better service. And so when we have less service, one of the reasons I think most people here that are responsible for shoveling their sidewalk don't support, for example, the program for the city to do the sidewalks is because we can't even get decent streets in the neighborhood, right? So if you tell me I'm going to pay more, but yet I can't even get out of my garage, that's a problem. And so the city people here that have homes or that are in charge or responsible for cleaning their parking spots or their sidewalks, you know that the service of the city is not up to par. You know that the service of the city is below standards. If you have friends on the south side or in nicer neighborhoods, it's quite different. And so I would fight, and if you can't keep the taxes to go up, I would make sure to do the boring stuff of making sure that you can get out of your garage to go to work. Now, when we talk about going to work, this is important. I mean, we just lost 3-4 major businesses, and we're talking about having more work. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense, right? If we're talking about work for nonprofit, great. Another nonprofit gives some more work. But if we're talking about businesses, I just talked today to a guy that started a business over by Washington. He has a gym, and he wants to make sure that his business is successful in the community. But if big corporations that have deep pockets can't survive in North Minneapolis, what's going to help a mom and pop that has less capital, less influence, less ability to get big money from downtown to survive here? So if we're talking about jobs, we need to change that. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question because I don't want to go too off topic here.
You talked about rent control. However, what have you done to keep insurance costs down? Homeowners and autos seem to have a redlining issue.
Yeah. We absolutely continue to have a redlining issue from private industry in North Minneapolis. My insurance is up, absolutely. I feel that pain right alongside you. I live right across the street from our condos, right? So, the way in which the only way that I can see the city having a role in that, right? Because Progressive is not going to go and talk to the mayor about that, right? But the only way that I could view the city being able to play a role in that is we need to get a handle on speeding. Because getting a handle on speeding means we're going to have reduced crashes. That's why I worked really hard to make changes along Plymouth Avenue and along certain routes leading to the schools. We're starting with the schools because that's where we can get political will. You're seeing more traffic circles, narrow roads, more traffic calming so that average speeds can go down, right? Now, I can't control the individual driver behind the wheel, but I can control that, making sure that the street's not so wide that that person is inclined to fly down that thing at 40 miles an hour. I can make sure that there's a traffic circle so that if they try, they're gonna have a real time making those two tight turns, right? We can build traffic calming. It's something that I have done. It's something I plan to continue to do to make sure we're bringing those average speeds down. That'll bring the crashes down. And if the crashes go down, you know, according to the rules of the free market, the prices should go down. You know, do I have faith that Progressive is going to do that on our behalf? I'm not sure. But that's one thing that we can do because we can't tell private companies what to do. You know, I do want to say that it is really important to make sure that as much as we can talk about how much North Minneapolis lacks this or lacks that, I think that when you see large companies leaving, they're not leaving because they're not making money. They're leaving for any number of reasons. But you've got local businesses on the corridor who are making money in this community. You've got Sammy's Avenue Eatery, you've got Calvin Little Driving Fire Construction, you've got Kenya McKnight and Zarab, you've got the Green Energy Training facility on Plymouth, and you've got Devin George coming in, and he wants to build a modular housing factory in North Minneapolis because he knows that there's a workforce here, right? You know, it is imperative that we replace Aldi. It is imperative that we replace Walgreens with somebody who actually wants to be here. But we also shouldn't lose the forest for the trees. You know, as far as pure jobs goes, we're losing 12 jobs with those companies. We're going to be gaining hundreds of jobs by the investments that your neighbors are making in your neighborhood. And I want to make it easier for them to do that.
Thank you. How are you defining safety? As we know, the police are not safety. When a child tells me a cop held him at gunpoint, that is not safety. How do you define safety?
Child, that's difficult because that should never happen. And that needs to be brought up to the attention of a council member, that needs to be brought up to the attention of leaders. That should never happen. But public safety to me is very simple. Public safety for me is an ecosystem where the different parts have their role in playing. And I support all the different public safety systems. But in order for the systems to work, they need to be supported. You don't take from one part of the system to give it to the other. You don't defund the police and give it to another group and say, look, I developed public safety. Public safety is an ecosystem. That's one of the reasons 3 weeks ago, Dr. Shevard said the city's not supporting us. My opponent is part of the city right now. What does that mean that he's not being supported? When the mental health group that had been developed and started did a Star Tribune article just this week saying that the committee that our current council member has, they asked for the 2-year extension because it will help them be more successful, and he voted to give it to us 1, which they said is going to make it more difficult for them to be successful. So this is the ecosystem I'm talking about. And if the ecosystem isn't being supported by the ones that are leading those systems, right? Dr. Secretary Alexander just announced he's leaving today, this morning. And so there's a problem. The ecosystem isn't working. You don't take from Paul to give to John. You have to request, get more money into the system. And so one of the things that the FPD asked for a grant of $2 million to be able to get more resources, and our council member voted against that. So we need to put into the system, not just shuffle the money around, because we have what we saw this week from 2 of the leaders of public safety in the nation. So that's for me, public safety. It is block leaders, is working on my block. I've helped all my homeowners, every renter there, to make sure that our neighborhood is safe. I get calls from neighbors that tell me right now, the neighbors tell me, Victor, I'm having a problem over here. I don't want to call the cops. Like, oh, don't worry. I'll call. I'll give you some options what you can do. I'll tell you. I'll explain to you how we can contact the homeowner, and I go help them. That's why when I say I'll respond to you within 24 hours, that's what I'm talking about. So give it an opportunity. Give it a try. Our websites have our phone numbers. Our websites have our contact information. Give it a try. If you don't want to call the police, if you don't feel comfortable calling them, call one of us and let us see what we can do for you. Give us a real opportunity to prove it and to show it to you. Thank you.
Martinez was there this morning. Some facts were not all the way aligned there. There's a specific word for that, but I'm not going to go there here. That contract that my son mentioned, that contract got extended. It was for behavioral health, behavioral crisis response team. That contract got extended. Not only did it get extended, and I supported it, I wrote the extension. So I want you all to have the truth when we're up here, we're debating our ideas here. That's what this is about. A couple of years ago, this city was wrapped in a debate about how we're going to keep each other safe. You had a significant portion of the city that did not feel safe with the old model of public safety. You had a significant portion of the city recognizing that through the pandemic, after the uprising, after the murder of George Floyd, violent crime was going up, and there was a conflict. How are we going to keep each other safe? Half of us don't feel safe. The other half is saying, we need more of this because we're becoming unsafe, right? Through that, there was an idea. There was a lot of debate and there was a lot of simplifying of people's positions, but there was an idea that we should have an integrated system. A system where you have the right response to the right kind of crisis. And the mayor, who initially was oppositional to that idea, to his credit, I'm not disparaging him here, to his credit, came out of that election cycle and said, you know what, you guys are right. We need an integrated system. We need a system that has a diverse array of responses, right? And so we had already started creating that in my first year in office in 2018. We didn't wait for the murder of George Floyd to make investments in trying to start a behavioral crisis response team. We didn't wait until the murder of George Floyd to say we need an Office of Violence Prevention. But they were small things. And after the murder, when we first got them started, and after the murder of George Floyd, those programs were demanded to grow and grow rapidly, right? And so now, if you go on a ride-along, you're going to hear, even from MPD officers, that they appreciate the unarmed violence interrupters who are out there on the street. They think they're making a difference. You're going to hear that they actually love the behavioral crisis response team because one of the most time-consuming responses and ill-equipped responses that MPD had to deal with was around behavioral health, mental health, and behavioral crisis. By eliminating that, MPD is more freedom to do things that they're more qualified to do, and we've got a behavioral crisis response team that can keep us safe. What does safety look like to me? Safety looks like our kids can play outside. Safety looks like people are employed, they're stable with their housing. Safety looks like people can trust that the system that they've paid for is going to keep them alive. And I'm fighting to create that system.
The city council approved $3 million for South Minneapolis for violence interrupters and other things. What are we doing for the Fifth Ward?
We approved some extensions today, and I'll apologize for not having those numbers off the top of my head. We are making millions of dollars of investments on Lowry, on West Broadway, on Glenwood, which is a new group that's come up called the Strength Group, and we have violence interrupters on many of our major corridors, and I know that we're looking, and we just expanded their hours, right? I don't know if folks know this, but the Office of Violence Prevention was asked to be stood up 18 months ahead of schedule. The program is 2 years old, and they were asked to be stood up 18 months ahead of schedule. That means that program should have started 6 months ago, but they actually started 2 years ago, right? So there's been a little bit of a learning curve. And I think we're figuring that learning curve out, and we're seeing the service increase because of that, right? We have behavioral crisis. We now have vans that are 24 hours and all across the city. We know a lot of those responses are central in downtown, but increasingly folks are realizing that they can call on BCR to respond to things here. And I want to add that after my election, in 21, one of the first priorities that I had And I was really lucky to have gracious support of community members. I know Lisa Clemens was one of the folks who organized this event. Making sure that despite the public safety debate that we had, that I had strong relationships within the 4th Precinct, and I have those relationships within the 4th Precinct. We would not have been able to create safety on the corner of West Broadway and Lindale in the way that we have without that support, without that collaboration. And so I'm looking at building a network of support, making sure that all of our public safety services are operating, and making sure that all of our public safety services know that they have my support and my collaboration when they're out trying to provide services to the community.
When we talk about accountability, we got to talk about asking the hard questions. What's working? What's not? So just 2 weeks ago, I was at North Commons, and there was a violence interrupter there. Now I'm for trying different things and different opportunities, but when I was there was a scuffle between a young person in there and staff. The violence interrupter was there. I got out of the pool, I had my kids there, I want to stand in the way and say, hey, what's going on here? And the violence interrupter just kind of walked around like this while the young person was threatening the staff. Not very good at situational awareness, not very attentive, just kind of walking around. And I saw this, and I saw the young person punch the lifeguard. And then the interrupter, all he did was push him. There was a little commotion afterwards, and the young people left. A whole bunch of interrupters came, about 10 of them. I'm like, okay, they're going to talk to that young person, they're going to try to figure out what happened, and because the young person was like, oh, I got you, I'm going to come back, and blah, blah, blah. All they did, the interrupters, were talk to themselves. And the kids that caused the problem were in their vehicle. And I'm watching this, I'm like, there's something wrong here. So if we're going to take $500,000 or whatever it is that they're funding right now, and they didn't give it to the community organizations that are partially represented here today, that are actually already doing the work for free, that actually know the community, that's a problem for me. That's a hard question. What are we paying that money for? Just for a group, small group of people to stand together? That doesn't make sense. And if you ask the people that have been doing the work for years, to them it doesn't make sense either. And so I like to listen to the people that are in the front of the line, what's working, what's not. And I want to ask the hard questions. If we're going to be hard on our public safety commissioner, we're going to be hard on MPD, let's be hard on what we're doing right now as well. And right now, from what I see, unless violence interrupters does not improve or get better, I think we need to bring that funding back to the community groups in our neighborhood. Thank you.
A final question on that from a community member. How are you holding those accountable that this money has gotten to? So the money is obviously out in the community. Like you said, Jeremiah, this is money that's been re-upped. $555,000 went to touch, $400,000 went to Equip for Peace, and various others. Keep those numbers in my head that was just approved today.
You're on limbs, you're on
But curious to know in terms of accountability for these groups, and when you give the example that he just gave about maybe not doing as much as you'd like to see them do, what's accountability measures?
Yeah, I can't speak to personal anecdotes, right? I wasn't there. But what I can say is that we can, I'll answer this question in a few ways. One is that we have metrics. And the Cure Violence model, the John Jay College sort of model, it exists in other cities already, right? It's a model that exists, that means the metrics exist. And so we need to be able to assess how many contacts are they making. What's the recidivism when they pull somebody off the street? Recidivism means that they're in the back of the street, right? Those are the kind of things that we can measure, right? And after we have had years to measure those things, and we should keep track, we should be getting quarterly reports, which we are getting quarterly reports, then that's going to tell us whether we've got an effective program on our hands. We also need some continuity over who manages the contracts, right? And so in the last couple of years, the contracts within the city, just to give you guys a little bit of sort of inside baseball on how the city works, is that the program started in the health department and has since moved from the health department to the new Office of Community Safety. Once it moved to the Office of Community Safety, the program director got a new position. We had an interim director who was there for a few months and then got a new position. And we have a new director. The mayor recently hired a new director. Actually, the Secretary Alexander hired a new director, and who is, I think, less than a week on the job, right? And so we need some continuity in that office. That is how we are going to ensure that because the metrics are there, they're being measured. But how do we make sure that we've got regular analysis, that we've got regular updates on what's going on? The program director is in charge of that. And so for providing that continuity, which I think that we're on the road to have, that's how we're going to be able to keep those things in check. The last thing I'll say, I'm not sure I'm out of time, but the last thing I'll say is that we are constantly, as a city, right, and the mayor is the executive, he directs the actual departments, right? The city council funds the departments and writes policy, right? The mayor actually directs those departments. We are constantly figuring out how to improve services, and not always with success, right? But we are constantly evaluating how to improve services. I said this earlier today, we've had a Minneapolis Police Department for over 155 years, and I don't think anybody's saying, hey, we're done. We're done improving that service to the city of Minneapolis, right? We have had a violence interrupter program for 2 years, right? Of course we're going to be improving that service. We have had a behavioral crisis response team for 1 year. Of course we need to continue improving that service. And so my answer is that the metrics are there. We're going to continue to measure them, and we need to ensure continuity so that people know what kind of services to expect from the city.
And just to clarify a point that you made, recidivism is not just letting them back on the street, it's actually committing a new offense or some type of offense when they come back on the street, just to clarify. So it's not just coming back out of jail or something like that. Thank you.
2 years ago, I ran as well against my opponent, and we asked for stats, we asked for that. And if you heard right now, he gave more talk about their stats. 2 years ago, they told us their stats, and there was no stats yet. 2 years later, there's still no stats yet. Just think about that. If we have the stats, give us the stats. But 2 years into it, there's got to be some sort of stats, right? So that's what, to me, accountability is. Asking the hard questions, even if people get mad at you. Even if people are offended because you asked that question. You have to ask the question. We represent you, and if we don't ask the question, then we can't give you an answer, and we've been there 5+ years, that's not okay. It's quickly, this ain't rocket science. This ain't we're going to the moon and figuring it out still. This is keeping our kids safe. And for those that have here that have kids, all that in the community, are we safer now than we were 5 years ago before our current council member got in there? And I know I'm not blaming it on him or anything like that, but what are we doing about it? And if they're still pushing the defund the police platform, right? Is it him still not saying, you know what, I don't want to give more resources to MPD for whatever reason? If he had one, he didn't explain it very good in the meeting. That's not okay. We have to work together. We have to, and I have a plan to do that. On my website, I go into more details about it. I want to create spaces in the community where law enforcement can have breaks and eat their meals, and at the same time build relationship with community. It's happened before. In Juarez, I have friends in Juarez that have done this model, and it works. Everybody talks about, even in South Minneapolis, they're like, we just need to rebuild trust. Are we doing anything to rebuild trust? Nothing. We need to rebuild trust because you can't do anything else with trust. If you're married, you already know that. If you have children, you already know that. If you don't build trust, if you don't make them and work together, if I fail, we both fail. If you don't have that mentality, then it's not going to work. You can put anything you want, you can put ice cream on it, you can be whatever, make it look sexy, make it look good. But if you don't do the basics, it doesn't work anywhere. No matter what country, no matter where you're at, you need to do that. Some people say, hey, Victor, I'm the first candidate in 5 years to get the endorsement of the MPD. Most candidates run from them because of how they're toxic. I'm like, hey, we got to work together. This is a team. If you're toxic, I'm toxic. That's got to be the new approach. If you fail, it's I'm failing. Because that's accountability both ways. And anybody that's had a decent relationship or in a relationship, it goes both ways. That's how it works. And that's what I would do. That's my vision. Rebuild trust. I have a plan on my website. You can check it out. Thank you.
You're talking about careers and futures for our young people, when we should be asking how will we keep them alive long enough to do that? I just want to put that thought in your head. sure tenants are living in safe, up-to-code housing, and describe action that you're taking or will take.
Have to answer this. We are working out of my office to hold more absent landlords accountable than I think probably ever before. It started with a reorganization of regulatory services, and it started with reviving tools that we had long abandoned for whatever reason. One of them being a tool called the Tenant Remedies Action. The Tenant Remedies Action allows tenants to say, look, my housing is substandard. And when I walked in the office, there were two landlords in the city, one on the north side, who had huge portfolios, whose tenants had taken it upon themselves to go directly to the courts and figure out the TRA. The city can initiate a TRA on its own, even without the tenants having to beg for one. And we have initiated dozens of TRAs since providing a rewrite and some change policy within regulatory services. That's almost 1,000 units across North Minneapolis that are now being repaired, that are now being put into receivership by the court so they can be repaired and brought up to a dignified level. So that's one tool. We've also we've also passed a number of tenant protections so that people can get into housing, so that the barriers are not so steep that folks are falling by the wayside. And so that's another thing that we've done. Another thing is, I mentioned those intergovernmental partnerships. We've been working with the county. My office has worked directly with the county and the state, and so has the entire city council, to go after even bigger landlords. So if you've heard of Front Yard Residential, if you've heard of Stephen Meldoff, these are big big landlords on the north side who have a reputation of providing substandard housing, as well as Michael Khan, who we held accountable and got out of North Minneapolis in my first year in office. We are now getting those properties up to code. We are getting those tenants in dignified housing, and we are creating a better opportunity for folks along the way. Things that we are working on in the future is that a lot of rental housing in North Minneapolis are single-family homes. They're designed to be owned by an individual, right? They're not apartment buildings. They're not triplexes. They're single-family homes that are now being rented, and folks get in over their head. They're renting too many homes, and so we're working on a policy called Tenant Opportunity to Purchase. It's a policy that I intend to pass next term that would allow tenants to have the first opportunity to buy a home when their landlord goes to sell. Right now, a landlord or a portfolio is allowed to sell and buy without their tenant knowing. By having something like Tenant Remedies, by Tenant Opportunity to Purchase, we can take tenants who are on the verge of being able to pay a mortgage and turn them into homeowners in North Minneapolis. And I think that would, again, create an opportunity for wealth building, and it would create some ownership over the units that they're living in. If you don't own it, there's a disincentive to clean up the backyard and all those kinds of things. But if you do own it, you're going to take more care of your property.
One thing I just, I told you I have a property, and I took a class with the city that they offer to new landlords or to landlords, a free class. And they give you a discount for taking the class because you're going to be a responsible landlord and take care of the people there. And they have you pay $500 or $1,000, and there's supposed to be someone that goes out and evaluates the space. And when I got the building that I had, it was really, really bad. It was really bad. I mean, there was decades probably of it was bad. I put $15,000, $20,000 into it to make it decent, clean, safe, put a new furnace in it, water, things like that to make sure that in the winter people are taken care of. And they said that you're going to be grandfathered in from what they had before. I said, and I'm like, oh my goodness, and there's a grading system, right? I'm like, oh my, that house was so bad. I mean, I would have protested, I would have whatever. And I got to the computer, and they're like, okay, you got it like A, and it goes down. And like, okay, you're being grandfathered in. I was like, I was waiting for the bad. And like, oh, you get it, your grandfather in an A. And I'm running down a nasty building. The door of the main entrance, when the winter was hitting, the snow would just go inside the building. Like, and that's accountability. It's not working in our city right now. And again, if we could be crying out and get in front of police and harass police and defund the police, if we can do all of that crazy stuff, why can't we, when we get a phone call saying, hey, you're not taking care of my space, I will be there and I'll make sure that space is taken care of and we'll put attention to it. That's what I would do. That's accountability. Answer to the community. It's not rocket science. If the city struggles to keep accountability, you call me and say, hey, my neighbor has rats in their home, hey, my neighbor has a hole in their ceiling. I'm not going to just say, here you go, 311 or whatever, and hopefully they get to them in 2-3 weeks. I'm gonna be reactive. I'm gonna be active. I'm gonna be there. I've done it as a pastor 25 years here in the North Side. I've been there. People get hit by a car because of the lawlessness in our community. I am there. I helped these women go through deals because I was their main breadwinner and he's dead now because someone was driving away from police. I'm there. That's what you do. It's part of being a servant leader. That's what I would do for you. I would do for your neighbor, even people that don't like me here. I would do for you.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
How much more investment has been considered when it comes to video surveillance in our district as a deterrent to violent crimes such as robbery, carjacking, etc.?
I missed the first few words on that question.
How much of an investment has been considered when it comes to video surveillance in our community?
So we had increase, we've had a lot of increased private surveillance, right? Folks have ring cameras, folks have things like that. There has been increased investments in the video polls. They can be a deterrent for a while, but I think what anybody will tell you that on 12th and Morgan, on the corner of Glendale and Broadway, by the way, and I think, if you want to have a private conversation with somebody at the 4th precinct, they'll tell you, after a while, folks just start doing their business right underneath those video cameras anyway, right? They're not really a deterrent. That's not to say we shouldn't have an ability to catch people in the act of committing harms in the community, but it is to say that if we want to prevent them from committing those harms, we've got to be doing something different. The surveillance is not in and of itself a deterrent to those things. Before we were able to resolve a lot of the issues at that corner that we collaborated with the state to resolve, Inspector Adams will tell you, he's sitting there on the camera and trying to send guys by, they do a sweep, a few minutes later they're back there again, right? It's like they got a roster, next man up, right? It's not an actual deterrent to the issue. Again, fine tool if you want to catch people in the hands. I think that what we need to be doing, again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but we need to be invested in these collaborations, right? We need to be making sure that we can have folks, not only our model at the city, the pure violence model, but we also are investing in other models like 21 Days of Peace, which is operated in some ways out of the leadership of this church, to have a relationship with folks down there to say, hey, if you're not going to move, you're going to be arrested. And if arresting doesn't work, then we need to have another response. Again, that's what we did with the state, which was to say we're going to shut the business down and allow the business to handle that corner. And so, again, surveillance, I'm not a huge fan of surveillance. I do get that some level of surveillance is needed to catch people in the act, if that's what we're there to catch them doing. But it does not in and of itself prevent any crime from happening, at least not from what I've seen, not from anything I've heard from the 4th precinct. Again, we've got to be relational. We've got to have direct responses to the issues that we're seeing on the ground.
I think this is a big difference between me and Councilmember Ellison is that those cameras do work. And I figured this out real fast when I ran the first time and I knocked every single door in the ward like a crazy man. Is I noticed that the more affluent places, the safer places, they all had cameras. And I noticed that all the homes, the areas that were rougher, where they were threatening me for walking through there, didn't have cameras. And then I bought a camera on my house because running for office, people don't like me. They're trying to do stuff to intimidate me, which they did. But cameras do help. They help put it out there to allow your neighbors to say, hey, this is what that person looks like that just broke my window of my car again. This is what that person did when they went into my garage and took my lawnmower. It does help. Ask any homeowner that has a camera, the building that I have, I put cameras for them so they can see their vehicle. So if someone knocks on the door, you can see who's in front and knocks it open and someone that's not supposed to be there. I would actually seriously consider reimbursing folks on the north side to have a camera, ring camera, whatever it may be. I would actually look forward to investing into that and allow those folks to say, you know what, I want to give it to MPD or I don't want to give it to them. I respect that. But I would actually support that. We did that through NERC. NERC has done it in the past, and I would push that forward. There's money out there. It's not like there's not money there. NERC, for those that don't know, is Minneapolis' largest community organization. They get a lot of money, and you get to decide what that money is to be used for. And I would use some of that money and say, hey, you want a camera? You can't afford one? I'll put one up there for you. I got half of my neighbors on my block now with cameras. They just broke, in the last 3 years, they stole 2 cars of mine. They just broke my wife's Kia window again this week. My camera caught it. I saw who, one of our neighbors is a grandma that's taking care of 3 grandchildren that are really causing her a lot of problems. And every neighbor I've rallied them together to help those children, right? To be there for them. It's difficult, but cameras work. When we had the camera on Lindo and Bryant, 40% car crashes went down. Obviously, there's another legal issue there that I've heard the city's trying to fight to change the state law. I would push that to change the state law. Yes, the camera, I was younger when the camera caught me, and guess what I didn't do again when I was that age? When I was 16 years old. Caught me, I'm not going to do it again. And it helps. Cameras help. Let's do it the legal way, let's do it the right way, but I do definitely support cameras.
Thank you. Mr. Ellison, I have 3 kids, 14, 6, and 6. There aren't any programs in North Minneapolis. What have you done in your last 4 years to address this? And you can speak on what would you do to address it.
In North Minneapolis, at the city of Minneapolis, we really rely heavily on partnerships. I've worked to expand programs that work directly with youth, like Juxtaposition Arts, to make sure that they expand their services and be expansive in who they include in their programs. We've increased funding to the parks. A big part of why we increased funding to the parks was so that they could hire more youth over the summer, right? When it comes to teens, we're working, again, on employment issues to make sure that folks can have access to earning an income, right? We've got several folks that work out of City Hall in various departments through the Step Up program. And so I think that is all really important work. Those are things that I continue to fund. The challenge is that the city does not directly own any youth services. And so I've got to continue to figure out who are we delivering money to, right? And so the parks has been one of those partners. Again, we've had a number of nonprofits who have been those partners. We've had employment opportunities, expanding those opportunities that have been those partners for us. But those are the things that I've done. I know that myself, after a couple of years ago, there was a big call from community members to say, look, we need to open more community centers here on the north side, right? Myself and Commissioner Irene Fernando, who, the county kind of funds those types of things a little bit more naturally than the cities, we worked together and said, hey, where can we make something like this happen? Well, luckily for us, there were already a number of people who were trying to figure this out, and right now, the city has put money to help finish a sports rec center that's going to be at the corner of Plymouth and Linden. People can drive by and see that project going up right now. That project has been going for years. We do not have now, the specific focus of that program is on swimming and athletics, right? Not the only thing that our kids like to do, but it is an important thing that our kids like to do, and we need rec centers. The YMCA doesn't have a traditional lap pool. It's a great resource for kids. It's a great place for kids to go. But we needed a traditional rec center where kids can learn how to swim, where they can hang out, where they can play basketball, where they can build community. And so those are the things that I put money towards, and those are the types of opportunities that I'll continue to fund. That's it, while I'm not saying.
One of the things that we kind of continue here as a common theme is we don't really control, right? We have programs, but we don't really control them, right? I think that as a council person, you can control a lot of things. Because what we learned in junior high is that words matter, right? We learned from the school that the bully pulpit works because our current council member has used that, right? Or whether you agree with him or not, he's used it, but for some reason for kids, we just don't really control that. Accountability is important. I would propose a youth development fund that if Step Up, or any other program we give money to, doesn't use the program and the money that's given to them, and we got a surplus because we didn't have it. If they do that again, I'm going to fight to take that money out We create a youth development fund, and this is what it's going to be used for. We're going to target the kids in our community that are at the highest risk. We all know in our block who the kid is that's not going the right way. We all know. And so I would say, hey, my neighbor, 5 times, 6 times, 3 other girls, police keeps getting called on. We help them, we take them to church, we try to take them places, we try to get other neighbors to help them. We do what we can. But I would put a budget, a youth development fund, so that money can be targeted for those kids. Because yes, you're going to have a beautiful multi-billion, whatever it is, complex that is not going to reach the most needy kids in the community. If you notice, those kids, their parents don't necessarily go with them to places. So we lost the community a while ago, and we're trying to rebuild it, and I would support people in the community that are already doing the work and help fund them and say, hey, here's 600 kids. You take a child, you take this kid for the summer, you invest in tennis, sports, whatever it may be, and we'll provide a dollar amount to help them make it happen. That's what I'll do. The organizations that do not use the money and are effective with it, we'll put it somewhere else.
Given the current DOJ findings about the Minneapolis Police Department and their long racist past, what role, if any, do you see them playing in our public schools? Current programs include the Police Athletics League and the Police Recruitment Program. Please explain your thinking.
The role was what role do I think MPD should be playing in the schools?
Our public schools.
In public schools. In a lot of ways, we have various levels of government that I partner with. I've been really successful at those intergovernmental collaborations, right? And I think that anybody who has run for office knows that we have an independent school board, we've got an independent park board who I work with, right? You have voted for those people to make certain decisions on your behalf. I work directly with them, right? The park board has decided, and there was a lot of youth activism to say that they didn't want MPD to be embedded in the schools. That might not be a universal opinion, but it is an overwhelming opinion, and they're not there anymore, right? We do recognize that law enforcement is a career track. We want all of our kids to be on good, middle-class career tracks, whether that is something in public works, whether it's something in law enforcement. I would like to see us maybe focus more on the local colleges. I don't know that we should have MPD in our high schools, right? But that's also a decision that the high schools get to make, that the students get to make. And so, obviously, when you've got a criminal issue, MPD should respond to criminal issues, right? But if you've got a youth development issue, I think that we need people who know how to respond to youth development issues in our schools and improving safety in that way.
I would actually, here's where we differ again, I would actually allow each school to make their own decision. Because as you know, during that time we lost Officer Adams, one of our key public safety folks in our community, representing the community, soccer, the football team, got seen boys in blue. He was there. He is an asset. Those people are assets. But if you throw the baby out with a bathwater, you hurt what's already working. So I would be different. I would say no, and I would use my pulpit to say, let each school do their own thing. And if the parents don't like it, go ahead and talk to them. But what was happening was a decision was being made in the back room and being made in small groups where the majority did not agree. And that small group that's very loud makes decisions for the majority of us, and that is not okay. But I'd rather have each school make their own decision.
I have had family living on the north side since I was a small child, and they still live in the same neighborhood today. They have never met the current council member. What will either of you do to change that and their homeowners?
Try it out. Send me an email. Send me a text. I have 3 children in the age of 11. I have a full-time job. I have a part-time job. I pastor in the community. I'm at funerals. I do all of it too. I have property. I have a business. Try it out. Send me a message. You want to invite me to something that's going on that you care about? I'm not going to say, here are my office hours. You come when I'm available. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, when are you available? And let's find a time to get to you. Give me 3 dates. Give me 3 time periods, and I'll make it happen. Maybe I'm there 15 minutes, maybe there 20. I don't know. But I'll do that for you to prove it to you. We've had 6 years for our current council member to prove it. You've seen it. You've seen the messages. And so there's our comparison. This is what I've been doing for you.
I'm born and raised here in North Minneapolis. And while I haven't been in office for 30 years, I'm 33 years old. I've been here my entire life. Lived here, worked here my entire life. When I ran for office in my first term, you didn't have, the engagement in North Minneapolis was so incredibly low, right? You did not have council members who were even getting 2,000 votes, right? Now, I don't care how many votes I get, but when I'm looking at the field and I'm saying, nobody's breaking 2,000, you've got folks across the city who are getting 6,000 votes as an individual, right? That is a steep depth of engagement, right? And that disengagement, that lack of engagement, that's not the community's fault. You've got decades of elected officials who didn't engage in that way. We've increased voter turnout, and I already mentioned how we increased the number of constituents, cases that we're resolving. We've had more community meetings, right? I'm never going to be satisfied with the level of engagement until all 35,000 people that I represent say, hey, look, we know how to engage with you, we know how to get in touch with you. And I'm not going to undo 30 years, 40 years of disengagement in 6 years. But we have made a dent. We have increased voter turnout by over 1,000 votes in the subsequent last 2 elections. We're at people's door. We're serving people who have never been engaged with the city, right? Now again, we have historically had the lowest voter turnout. We've had the lowest engagement in city services. Those things have increased while I've been in office. And I have been, let's talk about a holy pulpit, I have been an advocate in ensuring that they increase. And I want them to go up even more. And I think that my office has proven, we can talk about what you could do. My office has proven that we know how to engage people, we know how to get more people in North Minneapolis engaged in city hall.
What are the candidates' passion for the North Side? What brought you to this work?
Say that one more time.
What are the candidates' passion for the North Side? What brought you to this work?
What is my passion for the North Side? You all, I've been pastoring here since I was 17, 16 years old. Patrick Henry, student body president, Christian Youth Club president. I care about this community. I care about you. I care about my neighbors. You know, I grew up on Section 8, single mom. We moved every year of my life until I bought my first house here in North Minneapolis. I care about the people. I care about their living, their standards of living. I have neighbors that maybe we don't agree on a lot of things, but they know that if something happens, they can call me. That's my passion. People drive me so. How do I knock 18,000 north? Because I like people, right? And I just want to clarify. Last election, the first election, my councilor had, yes, he had great work turnout. He did amazing work. But the last one, I know that a lot of that turnout was because of me, right? Let's split it up fairly. I asked my wife, my kids, they didn't see me very much. My legs were hurting, pulling muscles. There's people in this right here, this area is one of the areas that most candidates never knock. And I know how many times each candidate that I ran against the last time, how many times they knocked you, because when you go knock, you know who already was there. There's people in the Jordan neighborhood, which is the one that least people ever knock, and there's people here that live here that you know what I'm talking about. They're like, Victor, I've lived here 25 years, nobody's ever knocked on my door. And that's why I run these 2 places, right? So that's what I would do, that's what I believe in. No more excuses. You keep saying the bar was low and I brought it higher. I don't want to compare to the low. I want to compare to high. I want to compare to I'm going to go above and beyond. That's my mentality. No more excuses, as you heard again. Make it happen. And if I can't make it happen, let's move over and let somebody else try.
It's funny to get this question. It's a little funny to get this question as I'm looking at my former Pee Wee football coach in the back there, Coach Tate. See Michael Powell in the back, I've known whole family my whole life, right? See a lot of folks who I grew up with around here. I not only worked at Avenues for Homeless Youth and worked at Juxta, I was a student at Juxta, right? I didn't only work at the park, at the water park. I played football at the water park, at the field next to the water park. And so this is a community that I've known my entire life. That's my level of passion. And when I got older, and I saw all my friends who were, transitioning into professional life, and they're moving to Columbia Heights, and moving everywhere else, I'm staying right here on the north side. That's going to be true, right? I'm staying right here on the north side. I have my art studio on the north side, and I'm paying euros for a living, and that's how I'm showing up in this work. People can try to say what they want to say, but you haven't heard me make a single excuse on this stage. I'm telling you the truth about what it looks like to serve in this community. I'm telling you the truth about the kind of power that we do have and about the limits to that power. Because I could sit up here and just tell you that I can do whatever I want, and it's not the truth. But what I can do is I can show up every single day and advocate for North Minneapolis. I can show up every single day and I can demand more funding. And I've gotten more funding out of the city in North Minneapolis than ever before. On housing, on economic development, we have gotten money here to make sure that people can stay here, to make sure that they're not displaced. We have engaged more. And so I'm going to continue doing that work, right? And I don't take anybody looking to step up to do that work as a challenge. I welcome everybody saying that they want to give a voice to the North Side. I want to make sure that that voice, though, that the North Side gets, recognizes the beauty of the North Side, recognizes the creativity of the North Side. I want to make sure that the leadership of this community doesn't look at our kids and say, you're dangerous, you're a criminal. I don't value you. I want to make sure that the leadership that you all have and that you all deserve thinks that you should live here 10 years from now, right? And that you shouldn't be displaced by people who are wealthier. I want to make sure that the city enterprise does not look at the current residents of North Minneapolis as the problem to be excised to the Brooklyns or to the western suburbs. I'm going to continue doing that work. And if anybody can do better than me, I welcome it. But I'll continue doing it regardless.
What is your stand on the blue light world and how it affects North Minneapolis and the potential of it coming down to 21st Street could wipe out the Jordan neighborhood? What are your thoughts on this? Because a 2-lane trans... Oh, it's not wide enough. Okay, pardon. Yep.
Happy to talk Blue Line. I've been a real big voice on the Blue Line project. It is one of those projects that the city has one decision-making point on, but I'm sure that every single meeting, I'm having meetings with the project team, with the county commissioner, to ensure that this project is a value add to North Minneapolis if it's going to come here at all. And if it's not a value add, then obviously we don't want it. The biggest question on whether or not Blue Line will be a value add or a detractor is whether or not we are serious about displacement along the Blue Line, right? If we aren't, so I'm in conversations. I saw Katie Brown here earlier. He has a print shop, a union print shop on West Broadway. He had to leave early. Where we are in conversation with those businesses to say, what do you need for this to be a value add chain? Folks want things that have never happened on a rail project before, and I am excited to go and fight for those things. So how do we make sure that our businesses can have site control over where they're operating right now? Meaning they own those buildings. Well, I mentioned the commercial property development earlier. We're having success with Northsiders being able to buy buildings along the commercial corridor. I think we need to expand that fund, and I think that we need to ensure that every single business along the corridor that wants to buy the building that they're already serving you out of has the ability to do so. I want to make sure that we are exhausting every single recommendation that came out of the AIDS Displacement Work Group to make sure that the line is not displacing people. And, when it comes to the engineering on the project, we fought the project team when it wanted to run down Lindale and eliminate a bunch of people's backyards and potentially their homes. And we said, look, this is not the best place for this line. It's got to be going down Washington. And we won that battle. The project team is now looking at Washington as a change to the route. Now the project team is weighing its options along 21st and along West Broadway, and we're looking like what are the potential impacts? What's displacement look like? What's traffic look like? And how do we ensure that this train is not that we mitigate the harm, but that it is an explicit value add to what we need in North Minneapolis. I'll tell you the potential upside of the Blue Line.
I'm sorry, Jeremiah, you got your 2 minutes.
It's the flag.
1 minute, sorry.
Gotcha. Flag and 0. Gotcha. So, North Minneapolis basically this is slight hyperbole, but not that much. North Minneapolis basically pays for our transit system here in the metro area. We deserve to have a state-of-the-art, dignified, fast transit system. More Northsiders ride the bus, take the train than anywhere else in the state of Minnesota. And so when I'm looking at this project and I'm saying there should be some value here, and I'm fighting to make sure that that is the value that we get, that's why. It's because we deserve good transit, we deserve good infrastructure. But again, if it harms people, if it displaces people, then we're going to have to be serious about that and make some different decisions. I think that we can build a light rail project that is a value add to the community.
Thank you. I'm able to cut you off.
One thing that I heard, he said that the city only has one decision. The city has a lot of decisions in this project. There's ways that you can help the business this year survive. So what you get out of me is straight shooter, right? The businesses that we have, there are a handful that are an asset to our community. And those businesses that we have, we need to make sure that they not only survive, but thrive with this opportunity. So when I talk to business owners, Tito, Lisa, when I talk to them, I say, hey, the conversation needs to change from fighting the blue line, because there's a whole bunch of people up the line that are fighting at the state level, and it's going to be to positioning yourself to not only survive, but thrive. So what I would do as a council member is I would personally be involved in that process to make sure that there's a lot of empty spaces that are really good on Broadway that are still empty. What I would do is I would negotiate with those developers, because guess what? Well, those developers got city money. They got your money, my money. So I go to them and say, hey, if this project is delayed, you guys see the other project being delayed for a year, 2 years, millions of dollars. It could happen on Broadway too, whatever the construction delayed 1 or 2 years. Let's be real. And I would say to the developer, if this project, if there's any situation, will you reserve this unit that you have, the air conditioning, parking in front of you, would you reserve that for Tito? Would you reserve that for this? If they're impacted negatively to survive in the corridor. I would start strategically working with them. Not to say the city only has one decision to make. The city has a lot of decisions to make. Because if we keep talking to Met Council, they keep saying the same thing. All they say is, that's not our responsibility. That's not our job. We should do this. Everybody that's been to those meetings, the same result, the same answer. I would say, let's make sure you position your business. We're talking about like 10, 15 businesses that are an asset to our community. And there's a few of them that aren't an asset that they probably want to go. Be strategic, plan ahead, make sure that the corridor survives, that our intersections survive. That's what I would do. I would be involved in those decisions with whatever pulpit that I have at that time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to make sure we get some clarity on the question, because I think the person who wrote it is saying that we didn't quite answer it. And so I want to make sure that Agwe has an opportunity to clarify the question if I didn't answer it.
The blue light rail question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my question, that was the question.
Okay.
So the question was, would the blue line potentially coming down 21st? Because the train will not both going in both directions, that was the word. The train coming down both directions won't fit coming around both those curves. Because one curve on Broadway is deeper than the other curve, with brand new apartment buildings on each side. The potential of that train having to continue to come down 21st will wipe out the Jordan neighborhood. What is your take on that, us potentially losing the Jordan neighborhood because if that train comes down West Broadway, that's a possibility?
I think I made it real clear, a big part of why I ran and every single policy that I've worked on has been about anti-displacement. And so I know that a part of these projects is making sure they listen to the professional staff, but we also know that the professional staff doesn't get everything 100%, right? They didn't get Lindale right? Community came out and made that assertion. Right now, as far as the 21st route, if those of you guys that don't know, there's one building that is not, I don't think it's currently occupied, that the project is saying it would take out. And as of right now, the analysis is that that line's not taking out a bunch of homes and not taking out a bunch of people. If the analysis is wrong, then obviously I'm not going to support the displacement of an entire neighborhood. And that clearly answers your question.
I would want to take a look at places that have split up a line and what is done. Because if one line, if going through, messes up a lot of the area, if you split it into two, it's going to magnify that impact. So I'm not a fan of it, and I think that if the studies say it's more impact, versus less impact, I'm not a fan of that. I think that part of Jordan in that area, I think it's a beautiful area. I think it's a nice area. We got some beautiful homes there being taken care of. There's one in the corner that's gorgeous, and that would be knocked down. And so I've talked to those people, and they're like, hey, this happens, we're selling right away, or they're displacing other people already. And so I would advocate for that, and I'm trying to be real about that, saying, you know what, this is making twice as much of an impact in a negative way, rather than narrow it down to just one impact in one place.
So in the interest of time, we're almost at 7 o'clock. Do you guys have enough time to answer a few more questions that we have left? If not, just let me know. But I do want to respect your time. Okay. So we do have a few questions. Does the FIT have representation on the Community Long Range Improvement Committee? If yes, who? If no, why not?
I know that we've had some reservations on the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, and so I don't think that the fifth ward representative on the committee now. We put those things out. We try to recruit people to apply. I don't know if you guys know this, but even when it comes to paid staff in Minneapolis, there's a waiver reservation. We're trying to make sure that folks know that that when they come and they give their opinion and they help us decide the future of our city, that those opinions are going to be listened to. We've had a couple of boards who have spent a lot of time giving their recommendations, who felt like ultimately the policy direction that they recommended to the city wasn't honored, right? That sort of sours people on wanting to give their input to the city. I want to make sure that when people sign up for an advisory committee, that the council and the mayor are taking those things seriously. That's how we get more buy-in, that's how we keep staff retention, and that's how we make sure that people, when I'm calling around and asking folks to be a part of these various boards and committees, that they're actually filling out that application and saying, yeah, I want to lend my expertise to the city.
We're talking about the CLIP, right? For those that don't know about the CLIP, it's recommending major projects in our community. It has 2 positions. Each ward gets 2 people from each ward, and council member gets to choose 2 people. We've had one of those positions empty for over 3 years. And then our last one is over a year and a half. Every other ward has at least 1 person. Most of them have both already. The mayor also had the decision in putting something. He's filled his positions. So our council member is the last one that hasn't filled those positions. So when he talks about we're recruiting, you're not really recruiting. They're empty. Those are the people that are fighting. When you're talking about that project, they're the ones fighting for that stuff that you're talking about. And there's nobody there. There's nobody in that one seat for 3 years. There's one seat that's been a year and a half. We got one of the people that was on that board for many years. He's like, I did my part. Somebody else got to step up, right? So I would be looking for those. I would fill those seats as first thing as a new city council member. Thank you.
Are the police working on their relationships with the community, and if so, how? Specific examples that you know.
I can speak to the 4th precinct. I don't know that I can speak to the whole department, right? The 4th precinct is who oversees our ward. It's the relationship that I have. And I know that through a lot of, through hiring and through the leadership over at the 4th precinct, I do think that the 4th precinct is doing its due diligence to ensure that we've got good, that we're repairing relationship with the community here on the north side. The number one way to do that is to make sure that you've got leadership that knows the north side, and Inspector Adams is absolutely that, right? And to make sure that you're allowing that leadership to have a voice in certain strategies, right? That's why when it comes to problem properties, that's why when it comes to cleaning up the corner of West Broadway and Lyndale, I felt like it was important that while the state or the county might take the final action, that ultimately we needed my collaboration, the 4th precinct's collaboration, to ensure that people knew that the county and the state had all the information it needed to ensure that they could take action and keep the area safe. And so I do think that there is an effort out of the 4th precinct, earlier, but those efforts are really it's hard to stick those efforts when you've got a lot of bad press coming out of MPD. Obviously, we have the NBHR report. That's the state findings of fact. Sorry, I said report. It's actually findings of fact, court admissible, right? To say we have found a pattern and practice of racist behavior, sexist behavior in your institution, and we have found that leadership in the department at the very top, historically, has not done enough to address it. If people had doubts about the state report, the federal report, the DOJ, Merrick Garland came in, and their findings were even worse. Today, we settled a case for an officer named Ty Gindra. And Ty Gindra was caught, he would make an arrest, he would steal the drugs, he would use the drugs or sell the drugs, right? Violating people's rights along the way, violating your trust, violating the Constitution. Those kind of stories make it so that when you've got an officer, you've got leadership who's doing the right thing to build relationships, those things are constantly being undermined. So yes, I do think that we have people in the department who are interested in repairing that trust, and I think that their efforts are often undermined when we don't have a systemic way to ensure accountability across the board.
One thing that I agree on with Councilmember Jeremiah Ellison is that they keep getting undermined and by him as well. Just follow his tweets, follow his comments. He's part of the undermining. And so when you're trying to build trust, when your behavior is building distrust, it doesn't really work that way. When you're the leader, people follow you. Your community follows you. Right? I served on PAL for 1 year. We recruited 2 young Latino officers out of that. One of them is now an official officer. One is in the recruitment program. That's what we do. The defund police movement, guess what it did? One of the first things we wiped out PAL. Any of us here participated in PAL. PAL was an awesome asset, and that was one of the first things that went on the chopping block. That's not what I would do. Right now, our department is so depleted with officers that they prioritize one call, meaning that if there's a gun, if you're going to get killed, they will come. Right? So when I talk to, like, for example, the senior citizens on Broadway, Lindale, that building, it has the highest concentration of senior citizens in the ward. When I talk to them, they say, hey, there's people in front that are harassing us, young people harassing us, and you call public housing, we got no money, we got no security, so good luck, call the police. You call the police, say, well, if there's suspicious activities, we're not coming to that right now, you're on your own. And then you as a community member can't get in the building because you don't have access to the building, so you're left on your own to fend for yourself. So how are you supposed to build community trust? How are you supposed to take your time and investigate when you can't even have enough staff to get to the calls that are hurting our most important?
The question about the traffic and drug use on Penn Avenue and Lowry Avenue was not answered. Ward 4 and Ward 5 must work together to meet the needs of our community. How are all stakeholders and or administrators along with community going to work together to clean up that area and provide resources to the people that help hold up that space?
I will reiterate the intergovernmental partnership, because we can say that one role is going to be a hero role, or we can be real about the fact that all of this stuff requires collaboration. Collaboration with the mayor's office, collaboration with departments, collaboration with other jurisdictions. Cleaning up these corners is not as simple as one entity deciding to take action. We have seen as a result of, take bus shelters for example, we've seen bus shelters get out of hand, right? And then you've seen those bus shelters come and be removed. Now the folks who take the bus have nowhere to sit, have nowhere to stand in the rain, but also the problem doesn't go away. And so what we need to be doing is to lean into those partnerships, right? Right now, the violence interrupters, again, the program that we talked about earlier, they're finding, hey, as often as we are interrupting a potential incident between rivals on the street, we're also encountering people who are experiencing an overdose, right? And so while our experience is in breaking up tension in a fight, we got to know how to revive somebody because we're encountering them on the street, right? And so making sure that we are giving funding to North Point, making sure that we're giving funding to our community organizations to provide those services and provide that training is a big part of how we get there. Making sure that we bring the state in because they have a bigger hammer when it comes to problem properties, revoking a license, taking nuisance complaint action than the city does. They have more resources, they have a bigger tool to do so. And so that is the answer. The answer is that, we are going to, I know that there are a number of businesses up there. I know that there's a large lot up there. I know that there's also a bus shelter up there. And the answer is that intergovernmental collaboration needs to be working, including between me and Patricia Vuitton, who I do work well with. And again, when you're reinventing the wheel, when you're coming up with new solutions, it's not that every single corner is not going to be solved tomorrow. We've solved one corner, and now we've got to replicate that model to solve the next corner and the next corner. And we're going to do exactly that.
When is the meeting?
The meeting for Penn and Lowry. I don't have a meeting on the books for Penn and Lowry exactly. But I have had conversations with the state, with Latricia. Me and Latricia, we talk about that border that we share often. And so I don't have a specific meeting with North Point and the state on what we're going to do there, but we have started conversations at the local level and one-on-one conversations with the state about what it would take to get that partnership out on that corner.
That was my question, and I sent you an email.
Okay.
In other words, let's wait another few years and we'll see if we can make it happen.
But we've got it.
That's what happened. Broadway and Penn has been like Broadway and Linda have been like that for a while, and it took our Attorney General, who did an amazing job, to get involved. Why can't we do this? Is a city issue. I'm the city, I can't do anything about it, I give it to somebody else on top. That doesn't work. If it doesn't work, shut it down.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty simple? If we have children and if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, we change it, we shut it down. It's not that hard. You give me one chance, and I will address personally every single hotspot right there. Because there is a lack of desire to do the dirty work. It's not that hard. Give me that opportunity and I'm going to do it. I do it on my block. I do it for my neighbors. We're dealing with one right now by Broadway and Penn. Gunshots, they don't want to get the police involved, so guess what? I get in there and I start helping them mitigate the situation. I know how to get results. When we were working with Wellington, we said, Wellington, I got this business that knows how to take care of criminal activity. This is what they recommend. They were like, no, that don't work. They've done it over in South Minneapolis. So there's people that are just the same old, same excuses. I don't know. I would know about, as your council member, I would know about every meeting in the community. Because at Patrick Kennedy, I was student body president. Everybody thought I knew everything, and I did. Because when you're paid to do that work, I mean, I wasn't paid for that, right? But when you're paid $100,000, you better know what's going on in your community. Especially to the thank you.
Both of you spoke of the need for youth employment, our parks need lifeguards. Do you support one-time funding for Minneapolis public schools, like fixing the pool at Franklin Middle School so kids can learn to swim?
I would absolutely support that. My understanding was the last I talked to people at the schools, there was an intention to open Franklin Pool. Again, different jurisdiction. We can make promises that we're going to do things that we have no jurisdiction over. But what I can do is make a call. I heard that Franklin Middle School is going to reopen. There's also a number of other pools in the community that I think that we should, I grew up on a swim team over at North Commons. I was a lifeguard. And so this is something I really value. And so the school board's got to make a request, and I can reach out and say, hey, I heard you were going to open this. Apparently it's not happening. Do you need the money? If they've got money elsewhere, then that's fine. But yes, being a tireless advocate is a part of this role. And you can say that everything that has never been done, you would have done yesterday. But in the real world, we've got time, we've got other people, we've got to build relationships, we've got to work with people to get towards a solution. I've taken the time to do that. I not only have innovated on collaborations on the north side, I'm not pulling models from other parts of the city. People are pulling models from Ward 5 about how to get perpetual affordable homeownership in their neighborhood, about how to clean up problem corners, because North Minneapolis is not the only place where there's a liquor store that's a problem for the community, right? We are innovating here problems that are occurring all over the city, all over the county, and I'm doing that work, and in the grand scheme of things, we're doing it relatively quickly. I'm happy to take any meeting with anybody and let you know all of the things that we're doing, all the ways in which we've improved services, despite the uprising, despite the murder of George Floyd, despite COVID, which set us back. By the way, those programs that were that MPD couldn't continue for a few years, that was a result of a $14 million cut by the mayor, not the council, right? And I'm not faulting the mayor. We were dealing with budget shortfalls, we were dealing with COVID, but I think you all, again, this is a theme tonight, I think you all should have the truth as you're making your decisions. You shouldn't have empty promises, and you shouldn't be told lies that are just going to drive you to the voting booth instead of helping you improve your community. I'm here improving the community.
You wouldn't mind?
Both of you spoke on the need for youth employment. Our parks need lifeguards. Do you support one-time funding for MPS schools like fixing the pool at Franklin Middle School and so they can learn to swim?
So lifeguards. So interesting thing about the lifeguards at North Commons. When I was there 2 weeks ago, and there was that fight happening, I was there just a couple days there've been gunshots in that area. There've been things, we can't have a camera to take care of our most precious young kids in that area, on the outside.
The question was.
And so I would request, I would say, I don't even think it out right. You know how much a ring camera costs? $20. I would pay it out of my own pocket. If some of these things, they did it, they tried to do that to William in my neighborhood. There was a pool that was not fixed for a whole year. I'm like, what's going on? And so what I did, I called my representatives, like, what's going on? Oh, it's behind. You knew you needed to fix these things before that. Why it didn't happen? And you pressed them a little bit, and guess what? A few weeks later, it was working again. And even before that, when I was running last time during COVID, did you know in Ward 5, out of all our parks, right? Remember, we have the highest concentration of youth, right? All our parks, we only had one porta potty, while other lakes in South Minneapolis had 10 of them. And guess who made a fuss about it? I did. I put it on social media. You might call me a bully, I put it on social media. Look, we only need one. Call Latricia and say, hey, what's going on? Within 24 hours, 48 hours, you got a total porta potty. You had one potties. That's a miracle, isn't it? But that's what I would be doing. So I would ask the questions, and I would keep accountability. Because as a city council, yes, you're on jurisdiction. I'm not going to make an excuse because you have influence. And that's what I would do to help these local cities. Thank you.
Do you support one public
Stop. One question left.
Somebody else
I want to say thank you for staying here to make sure we got this question answered. I appreciate that. Hurt is an issue causing air quality issues, waste issues, health issues for 30 years. Community is asking for it to be closed by December 2025. What is your stand?
That was about HERC, right? I heard that correctly? I am 100% for closing the HERC incinerator. And anybody who knows, you go knock on most folks' door in North Minneapolis and you ask them, what are the most pressing issues? They might not say climate justice, right? Like folks aren't gonna say that. They're gonna talk about safety, housing stability, job security, right? But we talk to folks about whether they grew up dealing with respiratory issues, asthma. Ask folks on the north side if their kids have asthma. Ask folks if they feel safe planting vegetables in their garden. Now, all of a sudden, the climate justice issue starts to come into focus, right? People deserve to breathe healthy air. They deserve to know that they can plant vegetables in their garden. They deserve to know that they got clean water that they can rely on when they turn on the tap. And again, as the question said, for 30 years, HERC has not been the only contributor, but it's a major contributor to the health issues going on the north side. Another major contributor was Northern Metals. And the fight against Northern Metals started way before I was ever in office, but when I got in office, they were still causing issues to the community. They were still lying about their emissions, pumping heavy metal particulates into the air, floating across the highway and landing in people's yards. We also, and we shut them down ahead of schedule in partnership with the state. And that was large part because the community was talking to me, I was talking to the state, and we were catching them lying on official documents about the level of emissions that they had. So I've already worked tirelessly to close down one major polluter on the north side, and I plan to work, I plan to continue to work as hard to close down HERC. The last thing I want to say on this issue, though, is that in the last couple of years, the city has had incremental approaches to addressing lead in homes, which is an environmental issue that we face on the north side. And I fought hard to quadruple the amount of money we were putting towards lead remediation and to ensure and strengthen laws around lead disclosure so that landlords couldn't say they didn't know whether there was lead in the house, right? Folks now have to test. We've got money to help them test, and they have to remediate if there's lead there. The fastest way to detect lead in a home is to test the kids. That is not an ethical way to find out whether our homes are infected with lead. We've got to get ahead of that problem. We can't use our kids as lead detectors. And I put the money, $4 million just this year, towards making that happen.
This is actually really what we're going to agree on. I'm a realist, and I'll always be honest with you. HERC to shut it down when you figure out where to put the garbage, the stuff. So once if they figured it out already, I haven't seen it. So once you figure it out, you shut it down. Until that happens, that's what we're struggling with right now, until we find a place where we put the garbage in. And that's really interesting, right? Because I was like my buzzer, right? When I got my duplex, there was tiles in there that I know has asbestos. Because there's a certain year of when you have a house and certain sizes of tile, you know, I was never told. Truth in Housing never told me. Nobody ever told me that I had problems with my house. I had to figure that out on my own. I had to pay out of my own pocket. And so if we want to do better to help take care of our kids with toxin, we need to do better. If I'm getting a renter's license, they need to come right there and then, hey, we checked this house out, or we're going to go check it out within the years that we had asbestos in there. None of that is happening right now. None of that is happening. And most of our kids that are suffering that are in these homes are lower income folks. They don't know. I didn't know. When we were growing up in North Minneapolis, we lived in like 7 different places. They all had a lot of problems we didn't even know. I probably got some in right now. So something is not working. But with the Hertz final replacement, I'll support it. Me and him both will go marching and say, shut it down. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to say thank you both for coming here tonight. One of the things that I hear is public safety includes housing, income, education, employment. It includes all of these things to affect public safety. So I appreciate all the questions from the community to realize what that is. I want to thank Lisa Clemens. She's not here today for Mother's Love. Bridget Stewart from Agape Movement, Minnesota Civilian Public Safety Commission. And thank you all for coming, staying, asking great questions. We truly appreciate it. And Reverend McAfee, you can't forget Reverend McAfee.